As the body relaxes, the mind softens. You might notice those busy thoughts just kind of slowing down. Maybe even dropping like pebbles or sediment to the bottom of the lake. Notice if there's any mood present, any kind of sense of calm or agitation, any rippling or any kind of feeling tone present. Maybe pleasant, unpleasant, or just neutral. We're opening to the internal world and the external world. So you can include sounds or smells or the feel of the air against your skin, light entering even with the eyes closed. Let yourselves have a sense of where you are in space. And when you become aware of something internal, perhaps the mind being busy, or a pain in the lower body, I invite you to try on taking out the word my mind, my body, and just use the. The mind is like this. The body is like this. It might be familiar to you, it might feel awkward. It's just a way to have a different sense of the experience. It's not so personal. Oh, there's the mind going off again, but without judgment, just kindly noticing, oh yeah, this is what it does. Letting yourselves attune to change. Maybe there was some thinking going on and now it's over. Or the sensation arose and then it passed. Or there was a deep in-breath and then an out-breath. This constant change. Notice when you're here. And notice when you get lost in thought, entangled in a story. You can always come back here. Notice when you're here and notice when you're lost in story, entangled. And you can always come back here. Here, the breath is like this. The mind is like this. The body is like this. This is how it is here at this moment. Stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. And as we bring this meditation to a close, let's remember that we do this practice to benefit ourselves, our loved ones, and all living beings, seen and unseen. May all beings be safe, seen, and free from suffering. Thank you all for your practice. I thought before the announcements, I skipped over the part that Howie does in the beginning that's so lovely, where you get to hear each other's voices and chime in with your name and where you're from, because I think people are from many different places here. So what I would say is, if you feel comfortable to unmute yourself, say your name, where you are, and maybe one word that just encaptures what's present for you right now. I'll just say, I'll start. So I'm Linda, here in Eugene, Oregon, and the word humming is what's present for me. So please feel free.
Lori, Tucson, Arizona, gratitude. Oh.
Nancy from San Francisco, and bells, there's bells out my window.
Kyle from Boston, Massachusetts. Calmness.
Jason from Southern Connecticut. Peace.
Mary from Santa Barbara, California. Peaceful also.
San Francisco.
Mark, San Francisco, grateful.
Thank you.
David, tonight in Oaxaca, Mexico, and just the fireworks go off right now.
And Michael from San Francisco. My word is nature.
Victor from San Francisco, tranquility.
Thank you.
Davy from Port Townsend, trees, breathing.
Thank you, Davy. Steven. Yeah, go ahead.
Stephen, calm and relief.
Thank you.
Catherine, San Francisco, cool, fresh air.
Great, thank you. Okay. Anybody else that wants to go? Okay, so let's see, Howie, there you are. I'm gonna give you back the mic and I'll be back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Linda. Hi, everybody. Two things I wanted to talk about, and they may already sound familiar, but they're always important, I think. One is Donna, and Donna is it means generosity, and it basically it's code for, if you can, please send some money so that this can continue. It's not magic. It's full of wonder, but it's not magic. It actually runs on stuff like dollars and cents. So I posted in the chat just a copy of what you often see in the email that you get, and it shows different ways that you could contribute. Everyone understands that Howie's kind of Howie Senior. I'm actually older than him, but let's call him Howie Cohn. Is kind of superhuman in how he does this virtually every week for decades on end, and we are, we're so thankful. And Donna is putting thankfulness into action. So those of us who can afford to help, it really keeps it going. And it is today's such a perfect example because it gives us the opportunity to have people like Linda come and bring us her reference, her point of view, her knowledge, her wisdom. And this doesn't happen without Don. So thank you all in advance for that. The other thing is exciting. It's the Labor Day retreat that's going to be coming up at Spirit Rock. And I know many of you have more experience than me in all this, and I think a few of you have less experience. But for those of you who haven't yet been on a 5-day silent meditation retreat, especially in a place as incredible as Spirit Rock up here in
Sounds
Northern
great.
California, you are, it's there's just nothing like it that I know of. I went on my first 5-day silent meditation retreat recently, and it's incomparable. Especially with the teachers that are going to be here coming up on the 28th of August. So please take a look at that. I also included the information and the registration link in the chat. It's also available on the email that you got. There's going to be a lot of great teachers whose names I could butcher, but instead I'll just say that Howie will be there along with 4 or 5 other wonderful teachers. It's 5 days from the 20th of August to September 2nd. And if you've never been to Northern California, I can't think of a better reason. And if you are in Northern California or in California already, well, we happen to have the best weather on the planet right now. So why not take advantage of it and have this wonderful opportunity? Blah, blah, blah. Thank you for listening. And Linda, back to you.
Thank you, Howie. The Labor Day retreat is the very first retreat I went on some years back. It's how I met Howie, actually. It's a great retreat if you can do it. It's really pretty special. And yes, Spirit Rock is like the Ritz of retreat centers. It's quite amazing. So I wanted to tackle, I was talking to my sister the other day, and she's not a practitioner, so I had to think of how to tell her what I was doing, and said, oh, I'm talking about this very difficult subject, self, not self. And she said, you always choose the hardest thing. So this was always one of the most difficult subjects for me. In fact, in one of my very first conversations with Howie, I remember saying to him, I've been practicing a long time and I get this and that, but I just don't get this not self thing. And Howie was great. He just said, oh, don't worry about it. So, I didn't worry about it. I let it go, but it's always been there. It's always been a part of this kind of inquiry, and it's up lately. So I wanted to share some reflections on it. So I started with the title, The Paradox of Self and Not Self. And then Marilyn reminded me of a conversation she had with Howie where she was talking about being in the airport and how difficult the travel was and how she was remembering, oh, it's not personal. And Howie turned to her and said, and it is personal. And she was like, oh no, just when I think I got it, now what does that mean? So that was so quintessential Howie, just when you think you get it, it's like he throws in the curveball. So this is my second title. It's not personal, and it is personal. So I wanted to start with myself. It's personal, right? As a young adult, I was a dancer. I danced professionally, I taught, I performed, I choreographed, but in the mind, my mind said, you're not a real dancer. Because I didn't have the right body. It wasn't like the New York City Ballet. It was a grassroots collective dance company. It wasn't real. Second career, I was a psychotherapist. It took me a number of years. I remember sitting with clients and saying to myself, oh my God, they need a real therapist. I just didn't feel like I had it. I didn't get it. I did finally feel like that after about 15 years, but it was that familiar story, that familiar identity. Now I'm a Dharma teacher. What do you think? Here it is. It's so perfect, right? I'm not a real Dharma teacher. I'm not Howie, there it is. And, I remember being on a retreat once, and I didn't even feel like a real yogi there. I felt like a fake. And I talked to my teacher at the time on the retreat, and she said, oh, that's the imposter syndrome. You have the imposter syndrome. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty apt. It reminded me that I once wrote a piece, a little poem called, what was it called? Just visiting the planet, something like that. Just visiting the planet. So not even a real human. So this really goes deep. But I think it can be looked at in a number of different ways through the lens of the Dharma. First, I think about the hindrance doubt, right? This is so much about doubt. Am I good enough? Am I enough? Am I too much? Am I whatever? All the way that doubt infuses the ability to really have faith and trust in who this being is. And it also can be seen as just a form of mental proliferation, which is a real form of mental suffering. The Pali word is a fabulous word, which I'm sure you've heard Howie use, papancha. I love that one. So there's the mind just going off on these little tangents, these little stories. And they're often about the self. Am I enough? Am I too much? Am I okay? Was I okay? Will I be okay? All of those questions. This brings up the comparing mind, right? This is one of the ways that the mind also creates a lot of suffering. The comparing mind, comparing ourselves to other people. I'm better than, I'm worse than, I'm equal to. And also comparing ourselves to ourselves, like at another time. I used to be like this. I'm no longer like that. And aging can certainly bring that up. The Buddha called this mana, pride or conceit, and we can do it with anything. The way we look, the money or car or home we have, how many friends we have, the way we talk, the way we move, or how our body is aging. And we know the body ages. Changes in ways that we could not imagine even a year ago, a week ago, a day ago. It's the nature of impermanence, of change, and we have no control over this. There's no body in control, no body that's constant. And yet, when we wake up and find we can no longer see in the dark, or hear the sound of the doorbell, or stand on one leg as we try to put our pants on, or can no longer walk to the corner store, or can no longer tolerate wheat or dairy or remember words. Do we take these experiences as natural, or do we wonder why? What happened to me? I used to be able to. What will people think? What's wrong with me? Jane can do it. Why can't I do it? There's that comparing mind, both to others and to how we used to be. And we can see that these are really just mental constructions. They are stories that we tell about ourselves, how we are, how we always will be, how we should be. And we think that we are solid and long-lasting in a certain way. And these are delusions. How we identify with the body as myself, as me, as mine. These delusions are painful because we think we can and should be able to control this self. And when we can't, we suffer the loss of self-esteem, pride, what therapists call narcissistic wounding. This is a very common thing that happens. It's, the ego gets wounded. It hurts, it doesn't feel good. It says something about me, and this happens when we identify or cling to some image of the body or the self. Because there's no constant self that we can control that remains the same. And we do it anyway because it's a habit. It's what humans do. But like everything else, the Dharma teaches us to turn towards it, not to turn away. Right? This is the story that you hear over and over and over again. This kind of suffering we don't turn away from, we turn towards it. We don't want to be afraid to see it. So we practice and we learn to be patient with the clinging. And I say that because I think that's an important part. There's the kindness, the compassion. It's so easy to go, oh, there I go again, I'm doing that thing, as opposed to, yeah, this is really hard. I have to have some patience here with this clinging. This is a very habitual pattern. So facing that brings up shame sometimes, a sense of failure, that wounded ego, all of that breaking out of the delusions. But as Thich Nhat Hanh said, when we know how to suffer, we suffer much less. And I think that's what we're learning in a sense, is how to suffer differently so that we don't suffer more, that we actually find that way to not add the second and third arrows, right? So recently I've been looking at life's obstacles as Dharma gates. Instead of getting stuck at why is this happening or I wish it wasn't happening, is to really turn towards it and see, oh, what's the opportunity here? What's the lesson? What's the teaching? And as that one of the great Bodhisattva vows says, the Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them all. So they are boundless. They will show up all over the place if we look that way. And one such doorway is seeing these glimpses into not self. And I think it really begins with that felt sense of suffering that comes with the identification of self. And it invites an investigation into what else is possible. Seeing through a wider lens. How else can we look at this? What if I see comparing mind, for instance, which is what we were just talking about? What if I see comparing mind and I don't identify with it? I don't make stories about the one who this or that, but I just go, oh, comparing mind. Oh, hello, I know you. There's the mind doing that habit of comparing. It's not new. There's long histories of investigating this, being curious about it. But it's really front and center now in a way that's a little bit more experiential, not just cognitive, which is what makes me see this, I think, in a Dharma gate kind of way. I know that when I'm caught in mental proliferation of any type, when I'm caught in those stories about how am I doing, is this okay? Am I okay? I'm really cut off from the rest of the world. It's such an internal inward experience. There's just this inability to connect to other people or the environment. I can't tell when somebody else is suffering if I'm so caught up in my own story. So it's a really narrow lens to be in that place, and it can be really lonely. Joseph Goldstein says it like this. He says, it's not that the self isn't real, it is real, but you exaggerate it. You think it's really real, right? And I thought I would change it to say, you think you're really not real. It's the same thing. It's that kind of exaggeration, right? So Joseph talks about self, not self, in such a great kind of user-friendly way, I think. He's talking about, he said they exist. The self is our conventional reality. And then there's the ultimate reality. What's bigger? What's larger than the self? The two helpful insights I have found into seeing not self, which sits side by side with self, are impermanence and non-separation, or interrelatedness. So in terms of the impermanence, the self, like everything else, is inconstant, always changing. And again, I like the way Joseph uses simile to describe the self. He's talked about it as a river. And he said, we can look at this moving body of water and see the river. But the river is not the same as it was a moment ago, right? The water is different. Maybe the land has eroded over time. So we might think of it as a placeholder, the river as a placeholder. Like the self, constantly changing. I read the other day, the average adult human body loses 50 to 70 billion cells every day. So how can we be the same? Every day we're changing internally. It's quite dramatic. Some of these changes we're blind to because they're slow or they're invisible, and other times, over time, we forget how it used to be, or we notice and we wonder what happened. Comparing mind causes a lot of dukkha, but if we see it for what it is, as comparing mind, again, we don't have to identify with it, because even there, the evaluations are changing. 1 minute we're up, the next we're down. Sometimes we have more, sometimes less. The great poet Billy Collins wrote this short piece, Feedback, which says, the woman who wrote from Phoenix after my reading there to tell me they were all still talking about it just wrote again to tell me they had stopped. There we go. Fame to shame, right? Praise to blame, gain to loss. It's all changing. The Buddha said to his son, Rahula, develop the perception of impermanence, for when you do, the complete I am will be abandoned. When you see on a moment-to-moment basis that whatever is arising, whatever sense of yourself is arising is also dissolving right there. The reified version or fixed sense of I am is dissolving. We are not ridding ourselves of these human habits, but in the seeing, we're better able to disentangle ourselves from their clutches, and the result, less suffering. So we're not ridding ourselves. We're just opening our eyes to see it differently so that we don't have to cling. We don't have to hold on so tightly. And we don't have to suffer so much. So the second insight that's helpful to remember is that we're not separate from other beings. We are intimately interconnected. We have these selves that we've inherited, these bodies, minds, habits, genes, personalities. We don't ignore them. We understand we came by these honestly through causes and conditions. And though they're not our fault, we are responsible. So even if we don't take them personally, we also must take them seriously. These beings are how we exist and how we coexist in the world. How we act, speak, behave, all of that has impact on others and the world at large. If we act with a kind heart, we leave one kind of karmic imprint. And if we act with a cruel heart or a lack of awareness, that leaves a different imprint. Trauma not transformed becomes trauma transferred. Have you heard that before? I once heard that from Devin Berry, the Dharma teacher, and it's really powerful. It's that if we don't take care of our own trauma, what do we do with it? We generally hoist it onto others, causing more trauma. That's the kind of karmic imprint that we can leave when we're unconscious, perhaps. This Thich Nhat Hanh poem really says it so beautifully. It's called Interrelationship. You are me, and I am you. Isn't it obvious that we inter-are? You cultivate the flower in yourself so that I will be beautiful. I transform the garbage in myself so that you will not have to suffer. I support you, you support me. I am in this world to offer you peace, and you are in this world to bring me joy. I transform the garbage in myself so you will not have to suffer. That really says a lot. That's how responsible we are to clean up our stuff. So when we get that kind of interconnection on a deep, visceral level, it's hard to see ourselves as separate selves. But on the other hand, when we're lost in selfing, we can't tend to the rest of the world, to what else is going on, to who's suffering, to what's needed. That reminds me of the poem that I started with by David Wagner. When we're lost in selfing, the trees are not lost in selfing, right? We're the ones that get lost in selfing. But to come back to this idea of self and not self, I want to also bring in the famous Zen master Dogen's poem. To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to know the way. To know the way is to be free. To know the way is to be free. So it holds both sides, how important it is to know the self which leads to being able to forget the self. It holds both of those together. So facing ourselves honestly, looking deeply, investigating, we often come across places of shame or disappointment in ourselves. It happens when we take things personally. But if we see through a larger lens and widen our vision, we might be able to see our mistakes, our failures, or shame as Dharma gates. I once heard Jack Cornfield share something. This was a number of years ago. He had a series of seizures and some unexplained health problems, and he went to talk to Ram Dass about it. Ram Dass was alive then and had his own health problems, and Ram Dass said to him, "Oh, I failed that test too." And that was such a beautiful teaching of, wow, look, even these masters that we look to, everybody goes through this. We fail, we take these things personally, we should be better, we should be perfect, and we're not. And so I think when we look at these as Dharma gates, we might feel less brittle, more pliable, and experience grace. Brene Brown says, grace means that all your mistakes now serve a purpose instead of serving shame. So returning to Howie's version of it's not personal and it is personal, how do we hold a very personal experience tenderly, with care, and also not take it personally? I thought about the old Jewish joke, if there's no self, whose arthritis is this anyway? I'm sure you've heard something like that, you know. It's like, well, whose is this really? And I think that's, that's the great thing is that, yes, the arthritis hurts and we can really care about it. We can have compassion for this pain, this suffering, but not take it personally, not feel like we are at fault. Why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? This shouldn't be happening. Or if only. So that's, to me, is, how do we really hold it tenderly and also not take it so personally? And I think it also brought up this idea that of a parent and child. We put all our hopes and dreams and wishes into the children, teaching them to be good and ethical, creative, and take pride when they do well and suffer when they don't, and perhaps have shame or even blame when they don't. But ultimately, we know we have no control over them because they are who they are due to causes and conditions. And so we can feel the pain of their failure or whatever. We can feel the joy of their success and also not take that on as a responsibility. So it's personal and it's not. Howie?
Yes.
I think I totally lost track of time here. Are we ending at 8:30?
Yes, that's generally when we end.
I did a much longer talk than I expected, and we are not doing breakout groups, obviously. Wow. In the last few moments, we have about almost 10 minutes. I'll just open it up if there's any kind of reflection, maybe on how you relate to it's not personal and it is personal, or how you see yourself suffer over identification with the body, the mind, the self. So if you feel safe enough, and this group has been going on for a long time, so I imagine there's some safety here, please unmute or put up your virtual hand so I can see. We'll have some shares. Victor.
Thank you. I really like the topic you picked because it applies to everybody. I think it is personal when circumstances or other people's actions affect us in a negative way, and that's when we feel the pain. So that's when it is personal. And when the action takes effect immediately, as it just happened, and I think it becomes impersonal after some time has gone by, and then you're more emotionally detached from the instant when things took place. And it is the gift of time that gives you the space to realize that it is not personal. That's how I understand your teaching today.
Thank you. Yes, Misha.
Yes, thank you very much, Linda, for the meditation and the longer than a Dharma exactly teaching. I guess how it landed for me, or what resonated, was the experience of like so I've been having challenges of various kinds that come up, and when I first can be with it in a way that it's like, oh right, this is a universal experience, it's not me being attacked by something, or I didn't do something to deserve this, or something like that. For me, that's part of where it becomes not personal. And then the current flavor of how that then, after being non-personal, is personal, is how I experience it as a challenge that's shaping me in such a way to be a vehicle of service for whatever life is wanting to, however life is wanting that. So it's also very non-personal because I don't decide that, but it's very immediate and feels very personally salient, I guess, is more what it is. It feels very salient.
Thank you, Misha. Yeah. Yeah, so Mark and then Stephen.
There.
Yeah.
Hi, Linda. Thank you so much. I related to many of the things you talked about tonight. I wouldn't even know where to start. But comparing mind is a big one. And I think it's haunted me for as long as I can remember, a long time before I even could identify it as an it. And that has been somewhat helpful. But it has destroyed me from time, time and time again. So thank you for talking about that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Yeah, Stephen and then Kyle, and I think that's all we have time for.
I noticed like in 1972, when I graduated college, I moved to an ashram for 11 years. And we were all young, and I was only 22. And now just about everyone in these groups are really old like me. And it's interesting how it's not attracting really young people that are too involved in their own day-to-day lives. And what I'm saying is, I don't think I'm really accepting the aging process that's almost suffocating me, because everywhere I turn, someone has something. And I guess I have to accept that sometime soon or not soon, it will come to me too. And I feel like I'm fighting it.
Sounds like a good awareness. Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Kyle.
Thank you, Linda, for the great talk tonight. I agree with, I think, what Mark said. Basically, everything you talked about resonated in some way. So it was a really useful session. I really resonated with a particular quote that you read from some Zen master, and I don't remember exactly which one it was. So I was hoping maybe you'd be able to dig it back up. But the part of the quote that stood out to me was losing the self is the way. And I just feel like so many of the issues that I experience in my life have to do with not letting go of myself and just really serving others and being there for others. And really being there for family, for friends, for a community, for just others. Just being a mechanism to serve them and make their lives better. And so it's like when you look back on your whole life, what are the moments you're truly proud of or truly did well? And it's usually the moments when you weren't thinking about yourself and you were just purely being selfless to others. So yeah, I wanted to say that really resonated, and thank you. And if you do have that quote, I'd love to look more into that teaching.
It's the Zen master Dogen's, and it's to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to know the way. To know the way is to be free. Okay, I really want to thank everybody for being together, for practicing, doing what you're doing. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Good night. Thank you very much. It was excellent.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. It was
Good night,
wonderful.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Night.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Linda, very good.
Bye, everyone.
Great talk.
We'll do the breakouts next time. We'll do them first.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Night, Linda.
Good night, everyone.
I just got so time confused. That was so strange.
It was great. We loved it. Thank you.
Yep, it was perfect.
It was perfect.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Good night,
Night,
all.
Linda.
Georgie, I see you.
So wonderful, Linda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Bye, all. I'm going to stop the meeting now.
Great. Okay.